Greetings. A dark side of education that no good teacher wants to deal with, but will, when the occasion arises they must, is bullying. The situation of bullying in educational settings and the lack of staff responsibility regarding it is disconcertingly all too frequent. According to the Oxford Dictionary, the word bully, as a noun, refers to a person who habitually seeks to harm or intimidate those whom they perceive as vulnerable. However, as a verb refers to that action to seek to harm, intimidate, or coerce someone perceived as vulnerable. Therefore, whereas a bully is always someone who habitually bullies, one can partake in the action of bullying even once, without fitting the definition of a bully who habitually bullies. Let us look at a relatively recent example from 2015, whereby a 9-year-old female student by the name of Saraia Collins suffered psychological trauma and a mild concussion when attacked by a second grader. Many other female students encouraged the beating and filmed it with their cell phones. The bus driver stopped the bus to verbally reprimand the aggressor twice. However, once the beating commenced, the driver just continued driving the bus. A $10 million lawsuit was eventually filed by the parents of the victim, who received $100,000 in settlement. The parents said they would not have gone to this extent had the school acknowledged the incident and handled it themselves appropriately. The parents claim to have desired the school to take responsibility for neglect rather than the money itself. Apparently, although the school's official policy stated that they aim to sustain a safe, positive, and inviting school climate, their policy was also that a school bus driver cannot personally break up a fight. This is an example of how sometimes one must do their job despite regulations forbidding it. The bus driver absolutely should have stopped the bus again and at least called the police if necessary, and if not, to break up the fight itself. Ultimately, he should have broken up the fight. The school policy should be that the bus driver has an obligation to intervene if a fight breaks out, and bus drivers should be hired that have the skills required to do so. Not that much skill should be needed for elementary school girls. That said, with the many ridiculous false accusations that come about when an adult does try to intervene in a case such as this requiring physical contact, one cannot entirely blame the bus driver's hesitancy. This is an example of an absurd law that claims to protect children while being one that has the effect of actually discouraging said protection. With little research, one will see that America and many other countries have decreed draconian actions against the possibility that someone may have accidentally brushed their elbow against someone's bottom, while considering mere fines suitable for extreme cases of bullying that result in suicide. They thus focus on what is not important at the expense of what is, and that expense is at the child's well-being, and the opposite of anything one can logically consider protection. Nonetheless, one has a duty first to morality, and must break any rule or law that is itself immoral. Legislation is meant to uphold morality, so when it contravenes morality, the law must be broken, for the focus is not on law, but on morality, which laws are supposed to uphold. Focus, then, on what is ethical, not what is legal. For laws exist and frequently arise that permit abuses and forbid God-given rights and duties by means of ill-defining abuse or what constitutes as abuse. In this case, the driver did not even so much as report the incident to anyone. There are situations that can and should be ignored, but this is not one of them. For one thing, this was not a mutually agreed to fight with normal schoolyard rules. This was an assault on someone who is heard and seen on recording, repeatedly stating she refuses to fight. This was not a fight at all. It was an unprovoked assault against a relatively pretty little girl, perhaps the motive in and of itself. The parents had made the school aware of previous bullying by the attacker and others, as it had been an ongoing issue that escalated to the attack due to the school's negligence. This is a rather tame example of a multitude of far more harrowing cases that can be discovered through the links provided. The bus driver ought to have intervened or at least reported the incident to the school and the police if necessary. I expect had the bus driver simply informed the bully that the police were being called, that she would have desisted from the attack. The school, which suspended the bully due to pressure, should have dealt with the situation long before it escalated to what it did. There is, rightfully, much said about the need for bullying to be addressed. However, much of the focus is on stopping the bullying itself. This is understandable, considering the plethora of cases that keep popping up. However, schools need to also provide students with the psychological and spiritual resources required to combat bullying themselves. Martial arts courses should be available. The mental fortitude that can be achieved through certain meditations should not be overlooked. Communication on how to deal with bullies so that they do not see them as vulnerable is necessary. Knowing how to recognize the leader of a group allows the student to know who to deal with. Once the leader backs off, the rest of the cowards will follow suit. It should be stressed that one does not lose value because of anyone treating them as though they had no value. Rather, the truth is, those who do not value others have no value themselves. This is why bullies do not just predictably pick on those they perceive as vulnerable, but those they perceive as superior. Knowing this can prevent many suicides. Dealing with actual bullies is important in education. However, even more important than that is to teach children how to cope with the negative things in life that will arise in the future, when the school system will not be able to assist them. As Benjamin Franklin said to the Philadelphians in 1736, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." By teaching children bullying coping strategies as early as preschool, far less bullying will occur, as far more students will know how to discourage it from occurring, or from escalating when it does. The very fact that Saraia was someone that would refuse to fight back under any circumstance is surely an aspect that bolstered the bully to attack her. Saraia should be willing to defend herself and have some skills toward doing so. In a class of Wing Tsun, I met the 5-year-old daughter of the Sifu and marveled at what skills she had already attained. I marveled further at the notion of just how powerful she might be by the time she is a teenager. I envisioned her in martial arts films. It is a safe bet that such a girl will encounter less difficulties with bullying as compared to someone like Saraia. One need not be a martial arts enthusiast, as were this Sifu and his daughter. Even a few months of training can make a world of difference in how vulnerable one is and is perceived. That said, often, just giving off the impression that one does not care and cannot be affected by what a bully says or does is enough to deter them. More powerful than that is reaching the point whereby this is true, due to your understanding that a bully is nothing to be respected or feared, for they are scarcely human, for reason that they are not humane. They are pathetic as is a parasite, for it is misery that attracts them, and misery that they consume, as it is misery, fear, and self-loathing that consumes them. As there are so many such cases of school neglect regarding the abuse of their students, more stringent actions must be taken, especially concerning cases leading up to suicide, and there are many. Paying a sum of money just does not cut it. Criminal charges should be made against those within the school administration who have failed to do their duty in protecting children from harm. Arrests should be made. Careers should be terminated, regardless of experience or qualifications. If one does not care about children, people, or students, they ought not to have the ability to be in the field of education. It is time for parents, students, and all those real educators who actually should be educators to take a strong stance against these occurrences and demand greater justice and penalties for those neglecting their duties within the system. The weeds must be pulled out of the garden and burnt as chaff. The well-being and often the lives of good students are at stake when ravenous sharks are permitted to go unnoticed within the waters. The student who attacked the girl was merely suspended, as far as I could ascertain. She ought to have been expelled, at the very least, and face some sort of judicial reprimand under juvenile law. If you are a teacher or a bus driver or in any way work with children, remember that you work for children. Your duty is to those students and their well-being. If a school threatens to terminate you for doing your job, it is then your duty to lose your job. The precedent for this was set in Nuremberg when they executed Nazis who claimed to have just been following orders, with the understanding that one's duty is first to humanity, not to one's country or supervisor. In the words of utilitarian philosopher John Stuart Mill in his 1867 inaugural address to the University of St. Andrews, "Let not anyone pacify his conscience by the delusion that he can do no harm if he takes no part and forms no opinion. Bad men need nothing more to compass their ends than that good men should look on and do nothing. He is not a good man who, without protest, allows wrong to be committed in his name, and with the means which he helps to supply, because he will not trouble himself to use his mind on the subject." Or, as put more simply in a collection of decrees made by the French National Convention during the French Revolution, and paraphrased by Spider-Man's Uncle Ben, "Grande responsabilité est la suite inséparable d'un grand pouvoir," which means, great responsibility follows inseparably from great power. As an educator, and even a bus driver, you have great power, and therefore, great responsibility.